I want to live a full life. Why don't people get married? They're afraid. Why don't they have children? They're afraid. People tell me all the time, I go, why don't you get married? Well, my parents were divorced. I go, so what? If your parents were in a car crash, would you stop driving a car? I don't understand. Your parents' marriage crashed. So therefore what? And by the way, even there, ask the question, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is you get divorced. So you're going to let fear of possible divorce stop you from ever marrying? You're going to let fear of, oh, I don't know how my kids will turn out or whatever reason to stop you from having children if you can have children? Then you don't live a full life. Fear is awful. Just awful. It governs people's lives, and I saw this with COVID and people sitting home. I have a dear beloved relative. She sat at home for a year and a half. She was so afraid of COVID. I'd rather die than sit at home for a year and a half. If it came to that choice, you might die or you don't live. You live alone for a year and a half. You don't know you'll die, you just fear it. She didn't know she would die. If you are governed by fears, it is really like being governed by an addiction. Dr. McDonald is right. Time to get sober. Start with not wearing a mask. Or start with whatever it is that you fear. Start with giving a speech. Start with going on an airplane. Ask what you fear, and then don't be governed by it. I'm a behaviorist. If you're not happy, act it anyway. It'll make you happier. Cowardice is the human norm, but people often admire courage. And I might go back to the addiction theory. I didn't quite follow that notion that fear is addictive. So he has a few explanations, but one I want to share with you. And he gave the example of cigarettes with nicotine. People will then take their next drug, their next cigarette. He said that calms them down. That's what the mask does. It calms them down. It was brilliant. I thought the analogy was brilliant. That's exactly what it does. And that's the reason he calls fear, certainly irrational fear, addictive. Because the solution is more irrational behavior. When I see people, my wife and I yesterday saw a guy and his dog. Nobody was in the street because it was so warm. And he was alone, just his dog, and he was wearing a mask. My friends, that is 100% irrational. 100%. Look, I think it's irrational indoors, but outdoors? Alone? That's when Dr. McDonald's thesis, by the way, again, the book is Freedom from Fear. It's worth getting. But that made so much sense to me. Just like the cigarette or the next beer or whatever it might be calms the addict, the mask calms the fear addict. That's exactly what the mask does. That was I thought it was a brilliant insight. Okie doke.